Welcome to the 3994, your weekly front row seat into the heart of Northwest Missouri. I'm your host, Jodie, and today we are sitting down with Atheah Erickson. She's a foster care advocate, a mom, and honestly, she is one of the most remarkable people that I've had the privilege of sitting across from. But first, we want to give a huge thank you to our sponsors who make this podcast possible. Crawford Construction, building Northwest Missouri one project at a time. Pancakes, Pups, and Suds. That's our pup's favorite groomer. We love her, Cassie Pancake. Gina's Cafe and Catering, homemade goodness right here at home. Greater Than Financial, they help us build our future that's greater than today. North Central Missouri College, the Savannah campus, they're investing in the community's next generation. And of course, Scooter's Coffee, because every good conversation, what? Starts with a great cup of coffee. We are so grateful for each and every one of them. Please support the businesses that support us. Now, Atheah, welcome to the 3994.
Hi.
I'm so glad to have you. It's been a while since we've caught up, and I know that there's been a lot going on in your life. So, for folks who haven't met you yet, tell us who you are.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here. Like you said, Jody, my name is Atheah Erickson. I was born and raised in Andrew County, and about a year and a half ago, my husband and I decided to pursue the route of becoming licensed foster parents. And since then, our life has been changed for the good.
What was that moment like, though, when you knew that foster care was something that you definitely were called to do?
We were actually at home, sitting on our couch, and my husband and I were having the conversation about our next steps in our lives. We had just got married, we had just bought a house, and I said, I think I want to get back to the kids in our community and, really step in and be that safe place for them. And within that week, we were signed up for classes and going through the process to become officially licensed.
So tell me what a typical day looks like for you right now. I know that you work, so tell us a little bit about that.
Yep. So I am employed at Mosaic Life Care in a leadership position. And so you know, the kids have daycare. And so my husband and I take turns dropping them off in the morning and then picking them up in the afternoons. And we currently just got another new little placement. But unfortunately he is in the hospital, and so, we're taking turns, driving down to Kansas City and, visiting him and advocating for him while he's in the hospital. But our oldest, he's in T-ball right now, and so we're, picking up from daycare, running to T-ball practice or T-ball games. We're really involved in our church that we attend, and so, we have church events usually throughout the week. My husband and I are also on the fire department, and so, we have trainings twice a month, for the fire department, and the kids love going to the fire station, and so we are just very busy. We have a routine and we stick to it, and that's how we get through the day.
I bet. I bet. Well, like you said, a year and a half ago, your life really changed when you made this decision. This isn't something that you've been in for years and years and years. So you're kind of new to the system. And so it's really interesting to talk to somebody like you who didn't even know anything about it before a year and a half ago. So for someone who's never thought about it, what do you wish that they understood about what these kids are going through and what the needs are in our community?
I would say, like, growing up in Andrew County, there was always, like, a bad wrath on, like, Children's Division, and it was always like, "Children's Division took my kid for no reason," or "Children's Division won't take these kids," and so, like, coming into it, my husband and I were like, I won't say, like, standoffish, but it was kinda, like, scary. Like, we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into at that point. And now that we've been licensed for so long and we've had, like, so many kids come through our doors and we've worked with, like, Children's Division agencies, like, across the state of Missouri, like, it's not like that. Children's Division, puts the kids first, they support the foster parents. Um, it's wonderful. I mean, re and I don't think people realize that reunification is, like, the number one priority in foster care, and so I always get asked, like, "How do you do it? Don't you get attached?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like, I've cried so many tears in the past year and a half when these kids return back, but attachment is the very thing that these children need." And so if we're not feeling that attachment, then we're not doing it for the right reasons, and it's unfortunate for the kids that come through our doors. And so, it's very sad, when they leave, but it's also like my husband and I have this motto that we're not only supporting the children, but we're trying to advocate for their parents as well. And so, we have weekly meetings with our kiddos, family members on the team. And, in those meetings, we're trying to advocate and push the parents to do their parenting plan and support them as well. So,
Which I didn't realize until we sat down together last year. I mean, you educated me so much on what was missing in my view of foster care. And I know now you've adopted two of the children that you fostered in the last year and a half. But how many kids have come through your home? Because I know that you're a family that was very much needed in Andrew County.
yeah, we haven't adopted the 2 kiddos just yet. We got guardianship of 2 kiddos. So we have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old that we have guardianship of. We've had them since the 1-year-old was 4.5 weeks old. And so they, the baby has like really grown up in our house, and the 5-year-old, 4-year-old at the time has really, you know, gone through a lot of first. We started Head Start, we start kindergarten next year. Um, if I had to give you a number, I would say we've probably had 12 to 16 kiddos, come through our doors just in the year and a half we've been licensed. A lot of times, Children's Vision will call and, it's a Friday and they can't find placement. And so we are willing to, do the weekend or do kind of like an emergency situation. Um, but the youngest we've had, was 3 days old, and the oldest we have had was 16 years old.
Unbelievable. That's incredible. So let me put some numbers to what you're describing as far as the shortage goes. It, as of April 1st of this year, there were 12,357 kids in foster care statewide in Missouri. Andrew and Buchanan County alone account for about 146 of those kids. And like you said, they range from 15 days old right now to 20 years old. And you've also said that workers constantly are sending out emails, and you at some points get 5 emails a day looking for homes. And you said the other day you got 3 of them before 8:15 in the morning. So what does that tell us about where we are right now as far as the shortage goes?
There is a huge shortage for foster homes in Missouri. Um, in our county alone, I can talk to the week of Christmas, I think we got 10 phone calls for kids needing somewhere to go. And so, it does go in spells. There's, weeks where I'll get multiple phone calls, and then we'll kind of have a dry spell and we won't get a phone call for a while. But there is a huge shortage. Not only with like licensed foster homes, but people can also get licensed to do respite care, which is just a break for foster families to kind of have. And so they're licensed through an agency, and the children will go to them for a couple days, and it just kind of gives um, those foster families, a break. We can't take kids out of the country, and sometimes not even out of the state. And so if there's an emergency or if there's a vacation planned, those respite homes are important, especially if the foster families don't have um, support for themselves, for those kiddos to go to.
And I know we've talked about that, the respite idea. That was something I could wrap my mind around. Okay, maybe my family wouldn't be completely on board with being a foster family, but if we could be a respite family, I mean, it's a process, right? You have to get approved. They have to do background checks, all the things which we want the state to do. But how involved is that process?
Yeah. So in Missouri, to be licensed to foster or to be a respite home, you have to be at least 21 years of age. You have to complete background checks. You have to go to your PCP, and they have to fill out a document stating that you're in good health, physically and mentally. You have to prove that you have a stable income and a safe home. You have to be willing to participate in continuing education hours. And so every year, we have to make sure we hit a certain amount of hours to keep our license up. And you, you have to be willing to be a part of a team to voice your concerns. When children come into your home, you're advocating for them in the court system, and so, that is a huge part, and then you also have to be willing to partner with the child's family. I know I mentioned that earlier, and so it and then I think our class we did, Tuesday classes, and so they're kinda, like, sprung out a little longer. I think our classes lasted about 6 months, but you can take Saturday classes and get them done faster.
I love too that you have said over and over again that you really partner with the families. Like, as a foster mom, your number one goal is reunification, and it is to get these kids back with their parents. The goal is never, I want a baby, I want to adopt a baby right now. Let me grab one from foster care. Like, you really want the family unit to be successful. And I don't think a lot of us really understand that part of it. Maybe the perception incorrectly is that we're taking these kids, the state's taking these kids out of dangerous situations and they're being adopted. And that isn't the case, right?
No, mm-mm. I would say if I had to give a number, I would say at least 75 to 80% of kids reunify. Now, whether that be not parents, but some type of family member these kids go back to. And you know, every month when you have a child in your care, you have court. And so my husband and I, walk into court every month for our kids and um, we have to say, this is what we saw in visits with the parents. These are, our concerns. These are things that are going well. And so if you're not willing to be honest and advocate for the kids and advocate for the parents, then unfortunately, I would say that foster care isn't for you. But yeah, reunification has always been the top of our list once we got licensed.
And what happens to the kids that we were talking about where there's simply not enough homes? What happens when that's the case?
So Children's Division will get hotel rooms and take turns staying with them in hotel rooms. Um, During the day, the children will stay at the office with Children's Division until they can find somewhere for them to go. Um, a lot of times Children's Division will call me and say, we have a kid this age. We can't find any placement. If you can't help us, we're going to be staying in a hotel with that child tonight. And so a lot of times my husband and I will say, yep, we'll do it till the morning. You can come to our house at 8 a.m. and pick him or her up. And so they're very willing to like work with you if you're willing to help them out. Um, I tell my husband all the time, I'm like, we have an open seat in our car still, and we have an open bedroom. So there's no reason why we can't be that child's safe place for 12 hours. And so we we always help when we can. We're technically licensed for up to 4 kids, and so right now we have 3. So we're kind of, limited on how many more we can take, but it's important to help. That
And
that
yeah.
child's when that child comes into care, it's the worst time of their life. Through our training we received, they say typically children only have like 5 to 6 minutes to pack their belongings and get going with Children's Division, and so a lot of times, what my husband and I have experienced is these kids come to us with a bag, typically not even like a duffel bag. It's like a Walmart sack or a trash bag. And they just have, one pair of clothes and maybe a stuffed animal. And so we keep like totes of clothes and stuffies and just kind of, um, hygiene things so that when we have kids, they can kind of go shopping in our house until we can get to a store and get them the resources that they need.
One thing we didn't talk about is the resources that you get for being a foster family. I think a lot of the misconception is too, this is going to cost me a boatload of money. And while we'd like to help, we don't have an endless supply to give. And so tell us what you receive to help you serve these kids.
So, every child gets a yearly clothing stipend. The amount depends on how old the child is. That can be shopped for at Kohl's or J.C. Penney's in our area. Um, if the child is of daycare age, the state will pay for daycare as long as it's a state funded daycare. And so, when we started to get licensed, I started calling daycares in the area, just to like figure out if they had openings, if they could keep us like on a list. And so when we got a placement, it was easier to know who to call. So daycare is covered. Um, Children under 5 automatically qualify for WIC. And so formula, fruits and vegetables, milk, all the WIC resources the children get. um, every child gets a stipend, a monthly stipend that comes to the family. And so, depending on the age and the level that the child is at, is the amount that the stipend is. And so, um, that we use that stipend for diapers, for wipes, for clothes, for T-ball. We try to use it for experiences and logical things. There is a agency in Kansas City, that once you get a new placement, if you send a copy of your placement letter, they will send you what's called a placement kit. And it includes a Bible, an appropriate bag, so they're not leaving your house with a Walmart stack, clothes, really anything that you need, that agency will provide for you. Locally, I love this resource. We have what's called Cadence Closet, and they have shopping days for foster and adopted families. And they do it out of a basement of a church, and the people are wonderful. I've messaged them before and said, hey, we just got this 15-year-old and he came with sandals and it's 5 degrees outside and snowing. And within the next day, they would have me a pair of tennis shoes. And so that's kind of locally, and then like nationwide, what the resources are, but you're never alone. I think that's like the main thing I want to get across is you have like a whole team behind you. And new foster parents are usually like paired up with what's called a foster parent ambassador. And so my husband and I are foster parent ambassadors. And so when a new foster family gets licensed in our area, Children's Division or the agency you're licensed through will connect us with a new family, and we'll be able to help them with any questions that they have.
Well, it's unbelievable to listen to you because you are doing so much for so many children. But right now, you're doing so much for three. So tell us about your newest placement. I've been following you on Facebook to see the updates, but I know a lot of people that you're not friends with who are listening to the podcast today are probably curious. You have a little baby who is in not the best condition right now. Can you talk to us a little bit about this experience?
Yeah, so I was actually leaving work on the Friday that Children's Division called me, and they're like, "Hey, Athea, like we have this placement. Can you help us?" And of course, I'm like, "Well, can you give me some details? Let me call my husband, because I'll never say yes to a placement without talking to my husband." And so I called him and, he was like, absolutely. So I called the worker back and I was like, okay, like, where do I need to pick up this kiddo at? And they're like, the nursery. And I was like, how old is this kid? And they're like, he's 3 days old. And in my head, I'm like, I haven't taken care of a newborn since we had our first baby come into our house, and she wasn't 3 days old. She was, a month old. And so I had actually given our car seat to another foster family, because I thought that, we were done. And so I ran Target real quick, bought a car seat, and then went to the hospital and picked up this baby. Um, it was Easter weekend, and so I'm calling everybody that we have Easters with. I'm letting them know that we have this new child, and I'm, putting in a Target pickup order so I can get an Easter basket and all those things for him. And so, that weekend we just spent, going around to Easters. Our families are very supportive. And so even with, the less than 24-hour notice, he had an Easter basket at every single place that we went to. And so by, I think it was Wednesday, he was too little to go to daycare. And so my sister, one of my best friends, helped keep him during the day so that my husband and I could still work. And Wednesday evening, I just noticed something was up. He wasn't being, his normal self, and I took his temperature, and it was 102 to 103 degrees, and that's not good. He was, I think, 5 days old at that point. And so I loaded him up, and we went to the ER. We got to Savannah, and I could hear him breathing in the back, and I was like, "This isn't right, this isn't good." And so I made a little pit stop, to the ambulance barn, and, they loaded him up and we went to the hospital. Unfortunately, his diagnosis is not well. He will be in the hospital for at least 3 weeks, if not longer. We already have about a week and 2 days down, and so that's very sad. It
Yeah.
was very hard, for me to figure out how to split my time between him in the hospital and then my 2 children at home and my full-time job. And so, there was lots of tears, and I still cry every time I leave him to go home for the evening. But ultimately, I know that he's getting the care that he needs, at the hospital, and the nurses will call me during the day and say, "We've cuddled him all morning. He's absolutely perfect." They keep me updated, and so things have been popping up, with him that, if we wouldn't have been in the hospital, it could be a different situation. And so, he has some heart things going on. Just, he's just a sick little dude. But exactly where he needs to be to receive that care.
That's amazing. And like your attachment, like you said, I mean, there's a lot of tears, right? Because you get attached. And it took you about 5 days, which
I was there,
anybody,
20 minutes. I picked him
20
up from the nurse at the hospital, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Okay, you can go." And I'm like, "I already love this little kid, so
Yeah.
much."
Yeah.
You lay eyes on him, and it's instant, but that's exactly what these kids need, is that love and that attachment and somebody willing to fight for them and advocate for them.
Well, I know that we could get into, maybe why he's sick or why other kids come into your care and they have medical issues. And that's a whole nother bag of goods. And of course, we don't want to scare off any potential families. We really don't. We just want people to know that there are kids that are in need right here in Andrew and Buchanan County. If there is a family listening right now and they're thinking, well, maybe we could do this, what would you say is the very first step?
Do your research. Get online to Children's Division. They have a whole foster care site, that will tell you, numbers and details and the steps that you have to take to get licensed. My husband and I, we prayed for a really long time, as well. Is this what God wants us to do? Is, this the path that he wants us to take? Absolutely. You can reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions, get you connected with, um, the agency we're licensed through. I can get you connected with Children's Division. And, just do your research. Who you get licensed through is a big tell of how your experience could be. And so, we did a lot of, investigation on all of the different agencies that, offer licensing services.
If you could talk to our audience and, tell them one thing today, what would you want Northwest Missouri to know?
I would say in our small county, like you mentioned, Jody, out of the almost, 12,000 kids in care, there are 146 kids in Andrew and Buchanan County. And I don't think, and I didn't realize that, from the beginning, that 146 doesn't seem like a lot, but it's a lot of kids for the amount of foster homes that we have. And that number is changing every day. I mean, just a couple weeks ago, I got a call at midnight that, 2 kids, in Andrew County needed somewhere to stay for the night. And so, it it's not just, the state of Missouri that's having the shortage, it's Andrew and Buchanan County.
What's incredible too is when you told me, earlier this year about the number of kids who stay in hotel rooms or who hang out at the office because there's not a place for them to go. I think that was the most alarming thing to hear from you. And even
Mhm.
today, there are kids that we know of that are not placed. And so that really pulls on your heartstrings, and you want to do something. And I think I asked you too, okay, so maybe I can't be a foster mom and maybe I can't be a respite mom. What can we do to support families like yourself?
Yeah, a lot of times I'll put out when we get a new kid, like an Amazon wish list and, ask for things for the kids. Um, there are support groups, in Andrew County and Buchanan County that, churches put on. Foster families can put in request and it goes to churches, and churches can, like, pull their request and support foster families that way. Um just, sharing our Facebook post. It's really the biggest thing. Like I said earlier, Jody, most of these kids come with the clothes on their back and maybe a stuffed animal. And so those Amazon wish lists really prepare them for reunification. Everything that we get from those lists, move on with the children. Um, and so I would say, besides, keeping the kids in your prayers and the families in your prayers, the biggest thing would be, just helping with those wish lists for those kiddos.
Yeah, that was a great thing that you put out on Facebook. I was happy to donate just because I knew that even just the smallest thing would help. And I love too when you were talking about how having a bag to move from home to home or move home was so good because they live out of a Walmart sack. That's so not needed. That's something we can very easily donate. So I love that.
Yep.
Well, this obviously was a conversation this week that I think all of us are going to really remember and that will stay with us. We want to remind people that as of April 1st, there are 12,357 kids in foster care across Missouri. 146 of them are right here in Andrew and Buchanan County. So today's conversation really stirred something in you. Then don't let that pass. Share this episode, talk about it, look into it, because you could be exactly what a child needs. And if you'd like to learn more about becoming a foster family, the resources are going to be in our show notes. Athea, thank you so much for being with us today. We obviously will pray. Tell us the baby's name if you can, so that we're able to pray for him specifically.
I can actually share. I can't share his name, but on my Facebook post, we are just calling him Baby Boy S.
Baby Boy S.
Yep.
That's a name. We got it. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jody.
A reminder to subscribe to the 3994 on YouTube. And if you're listening on Apple, a review means more than you know. If you want to go a little deeper with us, you can become part of the 3994 community on Patreon. Your support there helps us keep telling the stories that matter right here in Northwest Missouri. And that link is in our show notes. Until next week, I'm Jody, and this is the 3994, your weekly front row seat into the heart of Northwest Missouri. We'll see you then.